The Western genre has had more than its fair share of box office flops, and although some of these movies probably deserved it, there were many others that didn't. So I'm Mark, and in this video I'm going to break down my top 10 most underrated Western films that ended up flopping at the box office. So at number 10, we have One-Eyed Jacks, a 1961 psychological western directed by and starring Marlon Brando. And in the film, he plays an outlaw who escapes prison to enact revenge on his former partner in crime for double-crossing him during a robbery. But what starts out as a simple revenge mission ultimately turns into a complex, brooding, Shakespearean-esque tale all about betrayal, love, and vengeance, centered around a powerful, method-driven performance from Brando. Yet despite this, One-Eyed Jacks reportedly only grossed around $4 million at the box office, on an estimated budget of $6 million, proving to be a financial disappointment for Brando, who never directed again. However, over time, One-Eyed Jacks became somewhat of a cult classic, due to its stunning cinematography and nuanced storytelling, standing the test of time as a slow-burn, melancholic masterpiece that was probably too ahead of its time for its own good. Next up, we have Dead Man, a 1995 acid western directed by Jim Jarmusch and starring Johnny Depp, who plays a timid accountant that winds up becoming an outlaw. And this sends him on a surreal journey of self-discovery guided by a Native American, in what proves to be a very unconventional, poetic western that tackles universal themes of identity and morality. So it was always unlikely that Dead Man was going to make a big splash at the box office. But even so, the movie reportedly only grossed a few million dollars on a reported budget of $9 million. Although, since then, Dead Man has firmly cemented itself as a cult classic western, thanks to its dreamlike visuals, existential storytelling, and haunting score, composed by Neil Young. So despite failing financially, the movie still has a lot going for it, as it really is one of a kind. At number 8, we have The Lone Ranger, starring Armie Hammer and once again Johnny Depp. Because following the success of Pirates of the Caribbean, Disney were hoping that this movie would be the next big family-friendly action-adventure franchise, reimagining the popular 50s TV show of the same name about a lawyer-turned-vigilante and his eccentric Native American sidekick. However, upon its release, The Lone Ranger reportedly only managed to gross around $260 million worldwide, on an estimated combined budget of around $400 million. And this made it one of the biggest box office failures of all time, really damaging its reputation as a result. But the movie is nowhere near as bad as you might imagine, because if you put aside its pacing issues and misjudged castings, The Lone Ranger is actually a really ambitious western, full of breathtaking visuals, impressive action, and comedic moments. In fact, with a few specific changes and a smaller budget, The Lone Ranger probably would have had a much better chance of succeeding. At number 7, we have Ravenous, a 1999 horror western starring Robert Carlyle and Guy Pearce. And in the film, he plays a disgraced soldier sent to a remote fort in the Sierra Nevada mountains, where he encounters a mysterious stranger who harbors a terrifying supernatural secret. So without spoiling the plot, Ravenous is a wholly unique, genre-defying film that blends bloody horror and dark comedy into a tense frontier survival tale. But when it hit cinemas, the film reportedly only made about $2 million at the box office, on a budget of $12 million, making it a big flop. And as unfair as this was, it is somewhat understandable, given that Ravenous is a very unconventional original movie that was probably quite hard to market. But luckily, it's since earned a cult following, and is still a smart and scary offbeat western that's well worth checking out. At number 6, we have Seraphim Falls, a 2006 western starring Pierce Brosnan and Liam Neeson. And the plot follows a man seeking revenge against a Union officer in what proves to be a gritty survival thriller set on the American frontier, exploring themes of vengeance and redemption. However, despite its star power, Seraphim Falls ended up being a financial disappointment, reportedly earning just $1.2 million against an estimated $18 million budget. It was believed that a lot of this came down to a general lack of marketing and its limited release, but even so, it really underperformed for a movie that featured some great performances, striking cinematography, and a philosophical approach to its storytelling that really set it apart from other westerns. So it's without a doubt a hidden gem that deserved more recognition than it got. At number 5, we have The Sisters Brothers, a 2018 western starring John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix. And in the movie, they play two gunslingers who are hired to track down a prospector who's invented a revolutionary gold mining formula. So this leads to an action-packed, darkly comic journey across the Old West, in which the siblings confront their violent past and complicated relationship. And upon its release, the movie was met with critical acclaim, and was seen as a respectable adaptation of the best-selling novel that it was based on. Yet even so, The Sisters Brothers flopped at the box office, reportedly earning just $13 million against an estimated budget of $38 million. And again, it's difficult to say why, because The Sisters Brothers is a great western that's beautifully shot, well acted, and refreshingly unconventional in the way that it approaches the genre, so I highly recommend it. At number 4, we have Wyatt Earp, a 1994 western directed by Lawrence Kasdan and starring Kevin Costner. And in this case, he plays the titular lawman in an epic biographical tale that delves into the events leading up to the infamous real-life gunfight at the OK Corral. And to this day, the movie is still one of the most ambitious, detailed explorations of Wyatt Earp on the big screen, yet it massively underperformed, reportedly earning just $55 million on an estimated budget of $63 million. And a big reason for this was because Tombstone had just released a year prior, which proved wildly popular and seemed a lot more accessible, given that Wyatt Earp was a far more introspective, slow-paced take on the same story. And Wyatt Earp really suffered as a result of this comparison, despite the fact that it's still a really good western in its own right, that would have probably been received a lot better had it released just a single year earlier. Up next, we have Hostiles, a 2017 revisionist western that starred the likes of Christian Bale, Rosamund Pike, and Wes Studi. And the film follows a hardened soldier who is ordered to escort a dying Cheyenne chief and his family back to their homeland, despite his own personal grievances and trauma. So as you would imagine, this all comes to a head over the course of the journey, as they're forced to unite in the face of various deadly threats and unexpected setbacks. So Hostiles was a western with a really impressive cast that featured lots of gripping performances and incredible cinematography. But even so, the film reportedly only made around $35 million against an estimated budget of $50 million. And looking back, there really isn't an obvious reason why, as Hostiles is a beautifully crafted, thought-provoking western that's one of the best to release in recent years. At number 2, we have The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, a 2007 revisionist western starring Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck. And as the title suggests, the film delves into the uneasy relationship between the infamous outlaw Jesse James and his admirer-turned-assassin Robert Ford. But upon its release, the movie reportedly earned just $15 million against a budget of $30 million. Now this was quite the surprise, as the film was fairly well received at the time, due to its breathtaking cinematography, unforgettable performances, and nuanced storytelling. But it just struggled to find its audience, due in part to its long runtime and somber tone. However, nowadays, the movie is widely considered a modern masterpiece and is essential viewing for fans of westerns. So finally, at number 1, we have Heaven's Gate, a 1980 western directed by Michael Cimino and starring Chris Christopherson and Christopher Walken. Acting as a dramatization of the Johnson County War, the film follows a Harvard-educated marshal as he struggles to protect immigrant settlers from wealthy cattle barons, in what proves to be a grand, tragic tale of class warfare and American expansion. So Heaven's Gate was always intended to be an ambitious project, but in the end, that was what proved fatal, as the movie reportedly earned just $3.5 million on a ballooned budget of $44 million. So this made Heaven's Gate one of Hollywood's most notorious financial disasters, and played a significant role in the eventual downfall of its studio United Artists. So you'd be forgiven for thinking that Heaven's Gate is completely unwatchable, but the irony is that in hindsight, it's actually a really impressive film, even by today's standards, thanks to its stunning cinematography, staggering attention to detail, and epic sense of scale. So it's by no means the masterpiece that it hoped to be, but compared to a lot of films that release nowadays, it's still a hell of a spectacle and a truly epic western. And that's why, for me, Heaven's Gate has to be the most underrated western flop of all time, especially given just how badly it failed. But if you disagree, let me know below what your top pick would be, or if there are any other westerns that you think I might have missed. And before you go, you might also want to check out this video right here.